Denver International Airport was built on schedule, under budget, which is impossible. Eerie major American infrastructure project overruns. DIA didn't. The official explanation is efficient contracting. The actual explanation is that the facility wasn't built from scratch. It was built around something that was already there. In December, a Navy SEAL team went underground to find out what. 2 of them made it back. Neither one will describe what they found, but one of them has stopped sleeping with the lights off. He started doing that after he noticed what his own eyes do in the dark. The briefing happened in a conference room that didn't exist on any floor plan. 3rd sub-basement of a federal building in Crystal City, Virginia. Unmarked door at the end of a corridor that smelled of recycled air and old decisions. Sergeant Sergio Stone sat at the far end of a table with his team, Sloan, Stephenson, Buckley, Crawford, and watched a woman named Mabel McCormick load a classified file onto a wall display without introducing herself. She didn't need to. The DHS badge on the table said everything she'd decided to share. The mission brief was 11 slides. The first 10 were infrastructure schematics. The 11th was a single photograph taken by a maintenance worker's personal phone, before that maintenance worker was placed on indefinite administrative leave. Stone studied the photograph for a long time and said nothing. McCormick turned off the display. "Toxic gas event," she said. "That's the classification. That's what you'll tell anyone who asks." Stone looked at the blank wall where the photograph had been. "And what do we tell ourselves?" McCormick picked up her badge and walked to the door. "That you volunteered?" They inserted via a maintenance access point on the east perimeter of Denver International Airport at 0214 hours. December 17th. No commercial traffic at that hour, though the upper concourses still held a skeleton crew of late-night cleaning. Contractors, who would never know a 5-person special operations team was descending through a floor hatch 50 meters below their mop buckets. The access shaft was 12 feet wide, poured concrete, the ladder rungs coated in a corrosion compound that suggested no one had descended it in years. Suggested, because the dust on the rungs was disturbed in specific locations. Specific, human-width locations. Someone had used this shaft recently and replaced the surface layer grime afterward, which was not something a maintenance worker did. Rylee Crawford clocked it on the way down, marked it on her tablet, without breaking her descent rhythm, and said nothing until the team reached Sublevel 4, and she passed the tablet to Stephenson. He read it. His jaw shifted slightly left, which for Stephenson was the equivalent of a long exhale. "Someone's been running this route," he said quietly. "Stone, recently." "Crawford, within the week." Nobody said anything else. They moved. Sublevel 4 was the automated baggage transfer system, or had been. The conveyor infrastructure stretched nearly 800 meters in a single straight run. Wide enough to drive 2 vehicles abreast, the conveyor tracks mounted at waist height and extending into the dark in both directions. The system had been decommissioned in 2019 after a mechanical failure that, according to publicly available records, was attributed to bearing degradation. According to McCormick's file, the classified addendum she had loaded on their tablets, but not discussed in the briefing, the system had been shut down after 3 contract maintenance workers reported sounds they could not identify coming from Sublevel 6. All 3 had filed formal incident reports. All 3 reports had been reclassified within 48 hours. This was the detail that had convinced Stone the operation was real, rather than a training evolution in a repurposed facility. You don't reclassify maintenance reports about sounds unless whatever made those sounds has institutional protection. Institutional protection meant budget line. Budget line meant someone, somewhere, had decided the thing making the sounds was worth keeping. Tyson Stephenson activated the LiDAR sweep array from his wrist unit at the sublevel for entry corridor, casting an invisible scanning lattice through the space ahead. The return data populated his display, in real-time empty conveyor infrastructure. Wall-mounted conduit clusters, a section of collapsed ceiling panel approximately 300 meters forward. Standard decay geometry. Then the first anomaly hit the display, and Stephenson stopped walking mid-stride. Stone, 2 paces back, read the change in Stephenson's posture before he read the display. "Talk to me." Stephenson turned the wrist unit so Stone could see. 15 contact returns, moving, each one tracking at between 65 and 72 kilometers per hour, through the parallel access corridor, 20 meters to the east, separated from their position by a single concrete wall. Stone watched the contacts for 4 full seconds. They were not moving randomly. They were moving in a coordinated geometric pattern, maintaining consistent spacing, adjusting to each other's trajectories. That was not animal scatter behavior. That was formation movement. "Flag it as equipment error," Stone said quietly. "Stephenson, you think it's equipment error?" Stone, "No, but flag it anyway so there's a record of when we stopped believing it was." Crawford deployed her reconnaissance drone, a collapsible ISR unit the size of a folded newspaper, sending it ahead through the main conveyor corridor on a silent 4-order lift. The feed populated her forearm display, 800 meters of dark concrete resolved in thermal. The drone's imaging system painting heat signatures in false color yellow-white. The conveyor infrastructure ahead was cold, long dormant. The ceiling conduits were cold. The air return vents along the upper wall were cold. 300 meters out, the collapsed ceiling panel registered as slightly warmer than ambient residual heat from friction, which meant something had disturbed it recently. 500 meters out, the drone feed produced an image that Crawford looked at for 2 seconds before she pulled the drone back manually and powered it down. She pulled it down because the thermal return at 500 meters had shown not one heat signature, not 5, but a cluster of 14 individually resolved warm bodies seated in a single location with the organized stillness of something waiting. 14. The LiDAR had shown 15, which meant one of them was not warm. Stone looked at Crawford's face after she powered down the drone. Her face was the most controlled thing in the tunnel. "They know we're here," she said. Before Stone could respond, every light in Sublevel 4 went dark. Not a circuit failure. Stone had been in enough blown circuits to know the difference between a system that died and a system that was killed. A blown circuit produced a flicker, a brief voltage decay stutter, before the darkness. This was instantaneous, clean. The kind of clean that required someone, or something, to locate the primary distribution cable for this sector and remove it from its housing in a single action. In the absolute black, Stone activated his NVG without speaking, knowing the team was doing the same. The PVS-31 tubes resolved the tunnel in green phosphor light. He could see 30 meters. He swept left. He swept right. Nothing in the immediate corridor. What he could not see was what had moved in the 4 seconds between light and NVG activation. 4 seconds in the dark, with something that could run 70 kilometers per hour in a 6-foot ceiling tunnel, was not 4 seconds. It was a complete positional resort. They were no longer where anything assumed they were. Neither was the pack. Apollo Buckley's voice came through the bone conduction barely above a subvocal. "Contact, Sublevel 5, directly below us. Something's moving under the floor." The Sublevel 5 access drop was 40 meters back, a graded floor panel. Stone had noted on the way in. He did a rapid calculation. Whatever was below them had not taken the elevator. It had dropped through a secondary shaft, which meant it knew the infrastructure well enough to move through vertical space in total darkness at speed. That was not scent-following behavior. That was spatial memory. Tyson Stephenson, from his position near the east wall, said one word: "Static." Stone looked at him. Stephenson held up the wrist display. The SIGINT receiver was picking up an extremely low-frequency broadcast emanating from somewhere below and forward. Not radio. Not electrical interference. Biological. The waveform on Stephenson's display was irregular, but structured. A produced signal, not ambient. "They're communicating," Stephenson said. "Stone, in what range?" Stephenson checked his display. 14 hertz. That's below human hearing threshold. We'd feel it before we heard it, and only if we were close enough. Owen Sloan, from Pointreer. "I felt something 3 minutes ago. I thought it was the ventilation." The team tightened formation and moved forward, not retreating. Not because Stone had miscalculated, but because the only documented exit on the McCormick file that didn't require returning past the compromised shaft was 300 meters forward at a blast door accessed by override code. Forward was the only direction that led anywhere. Crawford had her fluoroscope up, but she was only looking left, the east wall, where the LiDAR had tracked the formation movement, the parallel corridor. Stone was watching the conveyor infrastructure, the belt surfaces, the lateral spaces between the steel framework supports. He was watching for weight displacement. A 700-pound organism stepping onto the belt infrastructure would depress the frame by a measurable amount, even a stationary frame. He was looking for that depression moving ahead of them in the green phosphor dark. He saw it at 240 meters. A single frame member between two conveyor supports, pressing down by perhaps 3 millimeters, then releasing, pressing, releasing. A 3 millimeter depression in steel infrastructure that indicated something massive was moving across it in deliberate, toe-first steps to minimize sound. And it was between them and the blast door. Stone signaled the halt with a closed fist. The team froze. In the silence, genuine operational silence, 5 trained human beings producing no sound, they heard the conveyor infrastructure ahead, producing a rhythmic, metallic whisper. Not grinding, not the sound of damaged bearings, the sound of weight. Distributed, controlled, 4-point weight, moving lateral to their approach, tracking from east to west across the corridor width. Sloan moved close to Stone and spoke directly into his ear. "It's measuring us." "Stone, what?" "Sloan, the spacing on those steps. It's been tracking the sound of our boots, and it's stepping at exactly our pace. It's measuring our stride." Stone processed this. A predator that measured stride length was mapping team width, determining how much of the corridor they occupied, what the optimal geometric approach was. This was not instinct. This was planning. He looked at Crawford. She had already rerouted the microdrone to a secondary ventilation shaft, and was deploying it horizontally. The drone cleared the shaft, opening 30 meters up the east wall, and turned its thermal forward. The feed showed the space between the conveyor framework, and in that space, at 200 meters, 13 heat signatures crouched and still, and above them, one return that registered 60 degrees colder than anything around it. Stone stared at the one cold return. A warm-blooded predator with a body temperature cold enough to register as ambient air. He thought about the missing contact from the original LiDAR sweep, the 15th return that the drone had not found warm. He thought about the counterintuitive logic of what something with working biology could do to suppress its own thermal signature. He thought about McCormick, who had been very careful to brief them on the pack, and not at all careful to brief them on what led the pack. The cold return at 200 meters moved. It moved directly toward their position, and the 13 behind it moved with it. Owen Sloan didn't wait for the order. Owen Sloan didn't wait for the order. He triggered his incendiary charge pack against the east wall. Not to kill, to illuminate. The magnesium flare inside the charge package detonated in white phosphor brightness that turned the entire corridor into a frozen photograph. The pack, mid-run, all 13 of them, arranged in a perfect inverted V formation, driving toward the team's position at a speed that the human eye registered, not as movement, but as appearance. They weren't running toward him. They were simply somewhere else, and then somewhere close. Stone and Crawford and Buckley opened fire simultaneously, disciplined controlled pairs, 5.56 millimeters, at center mass on the frontmost contacts. The rounds connected. Stone could see the impacts. The organisms registered the impacts with a slight physical recoil, and kept coming. Not ignoring pain, Stone had shot enough living things to know the difference between ignoring pain and not experiencing it at the relevant threshold. These did not experience the threshold. What stopped the forward advance was not the gunfire. It was the flare light. The 13 pack members hit a hard physical boundary at the edge of the white phosphor illumination radius, and stopped, abruptly, as if the light itself was a wall. They paced the perimeter of the lit zone fast, fluid, incredibly restrained for something that had been running at full sprint 8 seconds ago. Stone used those 8 seconds to move the team backward, toward the blast door, Buckley dragging Crawford, who had taken a glancing strike across the shoulder plate, from the leading edge of the formation, before the pack halted. Not a wound, a measurement. Stone understood by now what a measurement from this pack felt like. He kept moving. The blast door override took Stephenson 40 seconds, which was 38 seconds too long, with 13 organisms circling the fading perimeter of a magnesium flare. The flare would last 90 seconds from detonation. Stephenson hit the correct code sequence at second 41, and the door unsealed with a hydraulic thump that Stone felt in his teeth. The team pushed through. Stone went last. In the final second before he pulled the blast door closed behind him, he looked back down the corridor. The flare was dying, the white phosphor collapsing down to a dim red-drenched core. In the failing light, he could see the pack withdraw, not scatter, withdraw, in formation. retreating through a ventilation shaft access that they had opened by removing the cover plate from the inside. Which meant they'd planned the retreat route before the engagement began. Which meant the engagement had gone according to their plan, not his. The blast door sealed. Stone stood in the post-access airlock for 4 seconds, breathing. Buckley was already treating Crawford's shoulder. Contusion only, no penetration. Stephenson was back on the SIGINT receiver. He looked up at Stone. The 14 Hz signal just changed. Stone changed how? It's not communication anymore. It's location. It's a single signal. One source, very close. Moving vertical, above them. Stone looked at the ceiling of the airlock. The ventilation conduit above ran directly upward, toward the elevator shaft access. Something had gone above them before the blast door sealed. Something cold enough not to register on thermal. Something that had been leading the pack from 20 degrees behind the line of engagement the entire time. Stone looked at McCormick's file on his wrist display. The cover photograph, the one taken by the maintenance worker on a personal phone before that worker was placed on indefinite leave, showed a reflection in a tunnel puddle. The reflection showed something massive, standing at the top of an access shaft. The maintenance worker's photograph had been taken at this exact shaft. Stone hadn't connected it in the briefing room because the angle of the reflection had made the scale impossible to read. He connected it now. He looked up at the access hatch in the airlock ceiling. The hatch was sealed. The electronic lock on the hatch showed green. Secure. He stared at the green light for a long time, because the green light meant the hatch had been locked from the inside of the airlock, which meant whatever had used the shaft above had come down into the airlock, locked the hatch behind it, and was not above them anymore. Really? Crawford found the elevator bank 2 minutes later, and ran the Sublevel 9 override code from the McCormick file package. The car arrived. They rode up in silence, Sloan watching the elevator ceiling, Buckley watching the floor display, Stone watching nothing. The elevator opened on the secure operations corridor, adjacent to the eastern tarmac access. A windowless concrete passage that terminated in a steel fire door to the exterior. December air, raw, thin, carrying jet fuel and snow, hit them as the door opened, and Stone stood at the threshold between underground and outside, breathing it in. Crawford was already on the tarmac, scanning the perimeter. Sloan and Buckley moved to the extraction point. Stephenson stayed inside at the operations terminal. An outdated keyboard NCRT interface mounted to the corridor wall, still active, its amber cursor blinking steadily. He ran Stone's override code on instinct, not mission requirement. The terminal opened, not a maintenance system, not an infrastructure control panel, a project archive, black budget, classified under a classification tier. Stephenson had never seen formatted before. Not top secret, not see something older, a pre-standardization classification header that predated the current system. He scrolled. The project name was Amber Cathedral. The founding date was 1989. 4 years before DIA's construction began. The project's summary was 8 paragraphs. Stephenson read 2 before Stone appeared in the corridor doorway. Stone read over his shoulder. Neither spoke. The second paragraph explained why the airport had been built on schedule and under budget. The fourth paragraph explained what the annual December protocol was. The seventh paragraph explained McCormick's actual role, not DHS liaison, site supervisor. The eighth paragraph explained why 2 of the 5-person team had been specifically selected for this operation, and it was not their tactical qualifications. Their names were highlighted: Stone, Crawford. Stephenson closed the terminal before he could read the reason. He told himself it was operational security. He knew it wasn't. He closed it because he did not want to know the reason at this terminal, in this corridor, 40 meters above whatever had locked that hatch from the inside of the airlock. He wanted to know it somewhere that had windows, opened, not a maintenance system, not an infrastructure control panel, a project archive, black budget, classified under a classification tier. Stephenson had never seen formatted before, not top secret, not see something older, a pre-standardization classification header that predated the current system. He scrolled. The project name was AM opened, not a maintenance system, not an infrastructure control panel, a project archive, black budget, classified under a classification tier. Stephenson had never seen formatted before, not top secret, not see something older, a pre-standardization classification header that predated the current system. He scrolled. The project name was AMB. They extracted at 04 for 1 hour. McCormick was waiting at the extraction vehicle, an unmarked federal SUV parked at the outer perimeter access road. She was standing outside the vehicle in the cold, no jacket, holding her tablet against her chest, watching them cross the tarmac. Stone walked directly to her and stopped 2 feet away. She met his eyes without expression. "How many are down there?" he said. "McCormick, that information is classified above your access tier." "Stone, tier my ass. How many?" She looked at him for a moment. Then she looked past him at the illuminated windows of the terminal building, where 314 passengers from a delayed Denver connection were waiting for their morning flight. Drinking bad coffee, sleeping on plastic seats, not thinking about what was 30 meters below the floor under their feet. She looked back at Stone. She did not answer. She got in the vehicle. Stone stood in the cold for a moment, looking at the airport. All of it, the glass and the light, and the 30-year-old murals behind the windows. The horses at the entrance, with their burning red eyes, which he had never thought about before tonight, and would never stop thinking about again. He got in the vehicle. In the seat beside him, Rylee Crawford stared at her own reflection in the dark window. She had been staring at it for 2 minutes before Stone noticed. He noticed because of her eyes. In the dark glass of the window, the reflection of her eyes was not hazel. It was amber, dim, low pulse, roughly every 7 seconds. Of the 5 operators who descended into the sublevel infrastructure of Denver International Airport on the night of December 17th, 2 were medically cleared within 72 hours and returned to active duty. 1. Owen Sloan was placed on indefinite administrative leave for undisclosed psychological evaluation reasons and has not been reachable since. Tyson Stephenson filed a classified incident addendum to the UCB operational log that was sealed before Unit Zero's debrief. Officer could read it. The addendum file exists in the system. It has a creation timestamp and a file size, but the contents have been replaced with a blank document. Nobody has explained who made the replacement or when. Sergio Stone returned to his unit. He completed 2 subsequent deployments without incident. He has never, in any recorded or informal debrief, mentioned what he read in the 8th paragraph of the Amber Cathedral project archive. The archive terminal in the operations corridor was physically removed, not decommissioned, removed within 48 hours of the team's extraction. The question that remains unsealed is not what lives under Denver International Airport. That question, in the context of what you now know, is answered. The question that remains unsealed is what the December protocol is designed to test, and whether Sergio Stone and Rylee Crawford were selected for this operation because of what they could do, or because of what they already were. Subscribe to The World Behind Midnight to uncover the next operation before it disappears, because some secrets are best left behind midnight.